Do Canadians, though, intimate from what you just said that doctors, for example, are lucky that they have been able to earn more? I mean, are you insinuating that those doctors are not paying their fair share and that your government is now going to force them to in order to subsidize the programs that you've determined are necessary?
Welcome back to Northern Perspective, everyone. I'm Cypher.
And I'm Fox. The Liberals keep sending out new ministers to try and justify this budget, but the only clear message that they seem to be conveying is that we live in a society which should be more like communism than free market capitalism. This time, Mark Holland spoke with Vassy Kapelos, and she did not let him off easily.
Let's take a look.
Today with the new Canadian Dental Care Plan, with coverage set to start in just days. Starting in May, eligible seniors are expected to have access, but questions remain about whether the program will work. The plan aims to provide coverage for low and middle income Canadians who don't have dental insurance already, and details were announced late last year. So far, 1.7 million seniors have signed up, but there have been concerns over whether enough dentists will enroll. In response, the feds have since announced providers can instead bill insurance companies directly without formally signing a contract. Meanwhile, there are new worries in the medical community, however, when it comes to recently announced capital gains tax changes proposed in the latest federal budget. The change would increase the taxable portion of capital gains above $250,000 from 50% to 67% for individuals and for all corporations and trusts without that $250,000 threshold. Now,
So, this is very important, and Vassy highlighted it right at the beginning. So, if you're an individual, so if you're just, Johnny taxpayer, and you sell a cottage, you don't pay tax on that first $250,000.
Or you don't pay the capital gains at
correct.
least.
Correct. It's any profit made after that $250,000. That's where you pay that percentage.
many doctors are warning the change could undermine the retirement plans because so many of them incorporated their medical practices years ago. This week, the Prime Minister dismissed those concerns.
So yes, we are asking the most successful in this country to do a little bit more to make sure that everyone can see themselves in the success of this country.
Faced with this on top of our already, morally defeated and beleaguered physician workforce coming out of the pandemic, this is really, it feels a little bit like a beatdown, I guess.
Here to talk more about all of that is Federal Health Minister Mark Holland. Hi, Minister. Good to see you. Thank you very much for making the time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Vassy.
I want to start off, Minister, on those capital gains changes. Doctors through the Canadian Medical Association and many of its provincial offshoots are saying your government's tax hike in that respect is going to drive them out of the country. Are you willing to address their concerns and make changes, or are you sticking with this tax increase no matter what?
Well, I think that, when I'm talking to doctors, the changes that are made still, and I think this is very important, maintain their ability to incorporate and the many tax advantages therein, and the fact that the first $250,000 that they'll earn every year has that benefit that capital gains have of not having a tax on that first 50%. And then it moves from 50% to 1/3 advantage. So they're maintaining that. That's an incredibly important advantage. And we want, obviously, to work with them to make sure that and I know they care deeply about this, fairness with it is existing within the country as a whole, that we're making investments in things like healthcare and that there's a health system that's there, that they're working in, that is working well for them and for their patients. So I think that these are fair changes. There's still a lot of tax advantages accrued to them that will be maintained and continue.
But are you sure about the ones that you specified that will be maintained? Because the point that they've made is that governments 10 years ago, 15 years ago, in exchange for not increasing their fees by as much, said, incorporate, you're going to have that tax advantage available to you. That threshold you detailed, the $250,000, in the changes your government's introducing in this budget, does not apply to corporations and trusts. It only applies to capital gains for an individual. So how are they maintaining it? Their sense is that they're not, and it actually will greatly impact those who have used their corporation as a vehicle for retirement.
No, and there's been a lot of misinformation out there. Let's be clear: the advantages around incorporation continue; those aren't changing. The changes deal with capital gains, and on capital gains, you maintain that big tax advantage on your first 50% of your capital gains.
But not if you're a corporation.
The minister has no idea what is in his budget.
No, I don't think he understands the difference between a doctor having a corporation and that corporation being taxed, and then the doctor as an individual,
like an employee,
receiving a $250,000 exemption on that capital gains tax. He doesn't understand the difference. Like, one person can own a corporation, which is kind of what's going on with the doctor thing, but it's the corporation that's penalized. Therefore, the doctor doesn't get the money.
Right. Because they've increased the capital gains tax on it. And again, if you're an individual, you're exempt on the first $250,000. As a corporation, you are not. And that's the whole point. And he's trying to say, oh, there's been a lot of misinformation. How about there's been a lot of misunderstanding from the Liberals that are actually putting this budget together?
Yeah, it sounds like these Liberals have no idea how corporations even work.
Yeah, well, no, because your incorporated benefits, all those benefits that accrue to you as a incorporated entity, there's still huge advantages to that, and they continue. So there's, I think that when folks actually look at what those changes are and how they affect things, that it isn't nearly as big an impact as some is being made out to, and that for folks who are making, over $250,000 a year in their retirement, one of the things that we're saying is that, we need to have a system that's fair. We want to make sure that everybody is participating and has equal opportunities, and that we all have to be partners in that. And it's clear that those that are earning the most have seen huge gains, capital gains in their real estate holdings, their stock holdings, in their other assets. And so we're saying that, part of being in a society where we make sure that everybody does well is that we ask those who are making the most to contribute a little bit more.
Wait. Okay. Call me heartless, but we are not in a society that makes sure everybody does well. That's not where we're at. We're in a society that makes sure that everybody has access to some socially funded services like the police and fire and medicine and all that. But it's not my job to make sure that Johnny down the street is making $70K a year, just as it's not, Johnny's job to make sure that I'm making $70K a year. That's not how this works.
Well, and that's it. Canada is a capitalist society, and we have social elements, right? We have those social safety nets. We have medicine, fire, police,
roads,
schools, roads. We have EI in case you lose your job. Like there's this whole plethora of things that we have to support people in society, but again, it's not communism. Everybody's not being paid the exact same for different jobs.
Well, and if he and the cabinet are so concerned, right? They're so concerned about fairness, and they're so concerned that Johnny down the street does well, why don't they take 25% or 50% of their salary and, they use it to fund their own government? Oh, but we can't do that, can we? No, it's everybody else that has to do that.
Well, and this whole notion of fairness that the Liberals are putting in this budget, it's disgusting, quite frankly, because they're penalizing people who have worked hard their entire lives and are finally getting towards retirement and finally being able to, stop working and enjoy the fruits of their labor or assist their families in enjoying the fruits of their labor. And then the government's coming in and taking it away, not to give to, Gen Z and millennials, but to pay for their reckless spending over the past 9 years.
Do Canadians, though, intimate from what you just said that doctors, for example, are lucky that they have been able to earn more? I mean, doctors' mental health has greatly suffered since the pandemic. They endured a lot during it. When you say they make more than $250,000, I mean, many of them, primarily those 2/3 who have incorporated, are having to pay their staff, all their overhead. It's not like they're walking home with $250,000 all the time. Are you insinuating that those doctors are not paying their fair share and that your government is now going to force them to in order to subsidize the programs that you've determined are necessary?
So I love that Vassy is calling him on his crap. She's essentially saying, so doctors are lucky that they had to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to put themselves through medical school, that they have to work 12, 18-hour shifts, that they have had to, actually set up corporations in order to save for their retirement, which is what the government told them to do. And now you're turning around and saying, well, you're lucky. You're lucky and you've been successful. So it's time to share your success in the name of fairness.
Well, and this is the problem I've noticed with the left. I call it the iceberg effect. They don't see, everything that's under the water. They don't see all the struggle and the cost and the perseverance and everything that it took to get to success. All they see is the top part of the iceberg, the success.
Right, and the government wants to take a piece of that, all in the name of fairness, because they're essentially trying to use this altruistic approach of, well, look at everybody else, and you want them to be successful. Yet at the same time, I would not behoove people to say, I don't care.
All this entire budget is the government trying to take from the rich to fund their reckless spending, and then the government telling the poor how disadvantaged they are and how they're going to help them out. In reality, this money is going to pay for this ginormous deficit.
Well, and in reality, they're not just taxing the rich, they're taxing what's left of the middle class. And after this is done, there is no middle class.
Not at all. No. I'm deeply appreciative of the work that doctors do and nurses do, personal support care workers. The work that's done by everybody in our health system is absolutely extraordinary. I talk every day about how appreciative I am of that work. What I'm saying is that that those that are making the most have seen their assets and have seen their wealth expand enormously.
But didn't they work for those assets? Didn't they work for that wealth?
Sure, of course they work for their assets. But look, we can choose what kind of society we live in. Do we want to be in communities where there are huge discrepancies, where fairness and it doesn't exist, where nurses aren't able to, as an example, be able to afford to live, or do we make investments to make sure that there's fairness, that everybody has access and opportunity to a great life, so that we don't have the kinds of tensions that we see that come from enormous disparity.
And I do understand the concept, but I think it's also predicated on the assumption that your government's investments and spending will essentially lead to that equality and lead to that fairness. Much of what you're spending, for example, the billions on housing, maybe could have been mitigated if your government had recognized the scale and severity of the housing crisis much earlier. You've grown the public service by 40%. You've grown consulting by 60%. You're basically asking, Canadians to pay more, to offer more equality to people, which I think most Canadians would agree with, but predicated on an idea I'm not sure everyone can subscribe to, that the stuff that you're doing is going to work.
So a couple things there. So first, you're saying, well, they've had their assets grow, tremendously, and Vassy's a legitimate point. Yeah, but didn't they earn that? Well, yeah, they did. But, we have to choose what kind of society we did. Yeah, people have chosen, Mark. And a lot of people that have grown up and were born in communist countries, they've chosen as well, or they thought they did. They thought they chose to come to Canada to come and live in a free market. Not one that says, hey, government needs more money because we're irresponsible spenders, so we're just going to take more. But it's under the guise of, we have to, don't you want to live in a fair society? And it's this constant guilt trip from the left. And everyone is sick of it. Absolutely sick of it. You work all your life, and when you finally manage to get ahead, the government turns around and says, oh, no, that's ours now. Because don't you want to help out the rest of Canada? No. And you know why? Because I can't afford to.
And Canadians don't want to give the government any more money because, as I said before, it's not going to Gen Z, it's not going to millennials, it's not going to help them get a house, it's not going to any of that. It's going straight to the government to cover their deficit. Canadians do not want to give this government any more money when they are wasting it and squandering it.
Well, and I love that Vassy called it out too when she said, listen, you've increased the public service by 40%. You've almost tripled the amount that you're spending on consultants. You're wasting all of this money, and you're asking Canadians to foot the bill. And in terms of housing, hello, you guys have known that this has been a problem for a long time, and you've done nothing. So what's up, Mark?
Well, I mean, you're asking me to answer for everything. And so I can try to take each of the items that you mentioned, Vassy. Let's start with the housing crisis. 10 years ago, the federal government wasn't in housing at all. It was considered a provincial and a municipal issue. Our government put our hands up and said, we've got to get in here. The problem is too big. We can't allow this to just be a provincial or municipal issue. There were no investments, zero investments. And then when you talk about consulting, I mean, one of the things that's disingenuous about that conversation is that in order to make sure that when you have a pandemic and you need to scale up, or when something happens that is temporary in nature, you use consulting as a way to temporarily adjust your workforce.
I mean, consulting was going up before the pandemic.
So the idea.
Atta girl, Vassy.
You can't just blame everything on COVID, Mark. That's the million or billion-dollar excuse that is not flying anymore. You were already spending tons of money on consulting before then. McKinsey, anybody? Just saying. And then he says, well, 10 years ago, we were, the government wasn't involved in housing. You know why?
Because they didn't need to be.
Because they didn't need to be.
Because they weren't bringing in more people into this country than this country could support.
Right.
I mean, if you've got thousands and thousands of houses on the market and people trying to sell and nobody buying, then sure, maybe you could make the argument that we have more houses than we have people. But it's the exact opposite right now.
Well, and this is the thing, right? The housing market was what it was, and then the government just said, all right, we're going to be raising, the amount of people to about 1 million a year that we're going to bring in, and it's the province's jurisdiction to figure this out. And then when the provinces are like, wait a minute, you're making all these decisions, you're not even involving us. And then all these people come in, all these refugees, all these temporary people, and all these permanent immigrants that they're bringing in. And again, I don't blame the people coming in. I blame the government for pulling them in. So you now have, we've raised our hand. You raised your hand in the fall of 2023. Why? Because as Fox said, you were getting absolutely destroyed in the polls over it.
Well, and there was huge backlash after Trudeau said that housing was not a primary federal responsibility. And then the Liberals went, uh-oh, that was a bad thing to say. I guess we should focus on housing.
Yeah, and then the narrative changed. It's not our responsibility, but we're going to step up to the plate anyway, because that's what Canadians do.
That there are, there are non-critical investments. I mean, you look at what we did for the Canada Child Benefit and the hundreds of thousands of children that lift up to out of poverty, or the Canada Workers Benefit. All of these different, or how we were there for people during the pandemic and businesses during the pandemic. If we don't make these investments, bad things happen.
Let me, in that vein, then ask you about the dental program that's about to launch, and in particular, concerns that have been raised about the number of providers who have signed up. I think the last information we have from your government is that it was about 5,000. 1.7 million patients are eligible for coverage very shortly. I think math is not my strong suit, but I did the math. That's 340 new patients for each dentist. Do you think it is viable that all of these new patients will actually have the coverage that they believe they will have after having signed up?
Well, we've always said this is going to be iterative. It's why we're rolling out in cohorts, and very excited about the as you mentioned, well over 5,000 dentists that have signed up through the existing sign up. We've also created a new portal that'll be eligible on July 8th, where any office can just participate on a one-off basis, or always use it on a one-off basis. I can tell you every single day I'm meeting with dentists and hygienists and denturists, and we're growing the number of participants, and I'm very confident that we're going to get there. But like healthcare, like when we were first rolling out healthcare in this country, it's not going to be without its bumps. This is the largest federal government program that has ever been rolled out, and so there's eventually going to be 9 million people there. And every day we're going to be adding thousands and thousands of new people who are getting coverage, many of whom might have never seen an oral health professional. So it will be iterative, but the conversations with the dentists and the dental associations are going very well.
Very well. Ladies and gentlemen, there are a total of 25,000 dentists in the country and 16,000 dental offices. So let's just go with the small number just to give them the benefit of the doubt. That's less than a third of dentists that have signed up. Now, The magical question is, okay, you have these 1.7 million people who've signed up for this program that are going to expect to just walk into any dentist and get this and get this coverage, right? Who's to say that these people actually have a dentist in their area, in their province, that actually has signed up for this? What do they do?
Well, and this doesn't even talk about the strain that it'll be putting on the professionals. Something similar happened in COVID, and I can speak to this coming from the veterinary professional world, where during COVID, everybody got a new puppy or everybody got a kitten. Lots of animals got adopted from shelters, and the patient volume for the average veterinarian went up by like 50%. Can you imagine your patient load going up by half? That's huge. And the strain that it put on the veterinary professionals was huge. Just the strain and the overtime required to be put in, and it completely destroyed many professionals' mental health because they didn't have that time to just relax and be off the clock. It was constant stress.
And Vassy just said that it works out to around 350 new patients per dentist that have signed up, while the average dentist gets an average of 1,200 patients on their roster. So what does this mean? Well, this means that their patient base is going up by almost 30%.
That's a lot.
So what does this mean, right? This doesn't mean that, these people are going to get in to see a dentist potentially immediately. Remember, all the delays that people with doctors have? Like, if we want to see our doctor, sometimes we have to wait 2 or 3 weeks. And some people it's even longer because nobody has a doctor.
Again, going back to the veterinarian example, during the height of COVID, just to get our animals in for their routine shots, it would take upwards of a month just to see the vet.
And the thing is dentists are looking at this program, and they're looking at the Canada Child Care, the $10 a day daycare program that they rolled out, and they don't want that to happen to them. And you heard even in the beginning that because they don't trust it, the government's saying, well, you can bill directly to the insurance companies, and I guess they're going to then reimburse the insurance companies. Like this model just seems like a mishmash just to get something out. And they're trying to say this is the largest government program we've ever rolled out in Canada. Well, I don't think that's correct in Canadian history.
But this begs another question. If dentists can bill straight to the quote-unquote insurance companies, who is the government contracting to handle this insurance, and how much are they being paid?
Right? Because there's got to be somebody that is actually administrating this whole program. Who is that?
So let me ask you kind of a logistical question, because I imagine a lot of those seniors in particular are watching right now. If in fact they are eligible and they feel that they're about to get dental services and they try and they're having issues, like what should they do if it doesn't come easy?
Well, the first thing I would say, take a look at all your options. In many cases, a dental hygienist is a great option. I talk to dental hygienists who are very much have open books of business, really looking for patients. So you should look at all of the dental options that are available to you, and to get that appointment, at the very beginning, it may take a little bit more time, and we want to be clear about that. But we have a whole bunch of new folks that are signing up every day, and on July 8th, that's going to be a big day. That's where the alternative pathway is coming in. So there's going to be more and more and more participation in the plan. So, for folks who never had coverage, many seniors their entire life, they've never had coverage. It may require a little bit of patience, but not too much. And to go from zero, from that zero of 9 million people covered to get to that full 9 million. And it's going to be a process of continual improvement every day.
So that just goes to exactly what we said. So he knows this is going to be a dog's breakfast. He knows that people are going to be waiting forever to actually get in to see a dentist. And, to Vassy's question, okay, so what if they have problems? What if they can't get in to see the dentist? Well, look at all your options. What does that mean?
They don't know. They're just spinning their wheels. Like you heard Mark Holland, oh, it's going to take patience, but not too much patience.
Right?
Like, what is that?
Like, we have no idea how this is going to go. And I guarantee guarantee that when this goes south, they're going to be finding somebody to blame, and it sure as heck isn't going to be the Liberals.